What's up, everyone? Jason Gilbo here. With me is Brent Hyden breaking down tonight's nine-game NBA slate, or it's eight if you're playing over on FanDuel. They start at 7:30. Left out the Sacramento and Charlotte game. You just read something to me. We were laughing a little bit. I think it's a short, noteworthy joke that needs to be told on the pod.
Oh, you mean the Kawhi stuff? Yeah. So apparently there's some turmoil and strife surrounding Kawhi, and his camp is distant from the team. And so someone tweeted out that sounds like Leonard's career in San Antonio may be co-winding down. So I have to give Mason Ginsberg some credit for that when he is a writer for the Bourbon Street Shots. It's a site that covers the the Pelicans. So that was a good tweet.
That's a good one. And it's especially better if you just woke up and maybe you're having a little wake and bake section and it becomes massively more funny.
Yes. Yes, it does.
But tonight's slate, we're jumping to a Monday. We have quite a bit of injury news to deal with kind of across the slates. That was kind of once again the problem over the weekend. You do all the weekend NBA stuff for the site, so I feel like you get screwed.
Yeah, it does. It does stink sometimes, but it's gotta roll with the punches, and when the slate locks, just move on and start looking at the next day.
Let's dive into tonight's slate. Sacramento, Charlotte, of course, DK only here. Charlotte favored by 10, 210 over under. Not an attractive fantasy game, so it's kind of like I don't mind that FanDuel left it out tonight, especially given that there is some late injury news that we will need probably maybe the extra 30 minutes to hopefully get. But as far as the Sacramento side, we're kind of just once again waiting. Like we're going to probably see Vince Carter and Zach Randolph sit here tonight. George Hill probable. So it's kind of, we're getting a little bit of news here to talk about.
Yeah, you say it's not a very attractive game. I actually have a significant amount of interest in both sides of this matchup. Starting with the Kings, one player that I wrote up in the GPP article would be Skal Labissière. As you mentioned, we do expect Zach Randolph to be one of the veterans that does sit. It is notable that Labissière plays more minutes and produces more fantasy points with Zach Randolph sitting out games. This is an excellent matchup for him. I noted in the GPP article that the Charlotte Hornets over the last 10 games have been significantly worse against power forwards. They rank 29th in defensive efficiency against the position. They've fallen to 17th in fantasy points allowed on the season. They're giving up about 46.6. It's a good spot for Labissière, who is coming off a solid outing. Minutes have started to trend upwards. Again, some of that is blowout related. Some of that is related to Zach Randolph sitting. And it's a matchup where he dominated the last time these teams faced off. So he's a guy that I do have a significant amount of interest in, especially at his price on DraftKings, which is only 4,300.
You have interest in the guards here, Buddy Hield, De'Aaron Fox. I mean, fairly nice prices for those guys.
I'm probably off the Buddy Hield's train tonight, but De'Aaron Fox, you mentioned, he's been solid recently. I think he's coming off one down game, but prior to that had been really, really good. This isn't the greatest of matchups, but it's really not terrible. He's 5,100 on DraftKings. Good spot for him. I do have a lot of interest in Bogdan Bogdanovic. He's a guy who's been playing ridiculously well recently. I've noted several times in the past that he is one of the better ball handlers on this team. So it's a decent spot for him. I have interest in both of those guys. And then Willie Cauley-Stein is interesting too. It's not the greatest of matchups going up against Dwight Howard, but again, with no Zach Randolph, you expect the minutes to be there for him. So I like a significant amount of this Sacramento team.
Yeah, and we've seen Willie Cauley-Stein kind of thrive in below average spots before. Kind of going back, San Antonio had a great game, Denver had a great game, Utah had a monster game, OKC had a huge game. He's done it in bad spots before.
Yeah, he has. And again, he benefits from Zach Randolph being on the floor without Zebo and Carter, 24.7% usage rate, 1.15 fantasy points per minute. So definitely not someone that I would shy away from in tournaments.
Anyone else on Sacramento side?
No, probably not.
On the Charlotte side of things here, Kemba Walker's price is pretty interesting. He's only 7,700 on DK. He's kind of been around that range. Like he's a guy you can probably bank on for 35 plus fantasy points here tonight. Um, been playing well, and once again, the usage is just through the roof. His shot attempts are insane of late.
Yeah, he's definitely playing really well. Maybe he's showing off for his potential new team, whoever that could be. Quick note about that: I did include in the intro on the GPP article some Twitter accounts that people should probably make sure they're following over the next couple weeks with the trade deadline right around the corner. If you turn on tweet notifications for them, you won't get duped by fake accounts and things like that. So it is very, very, very important with the trade deadline coming before the All-Star break and not during the All-Star break that we're following that news, because guys like Kemba Walker are on the trading block. So but yeah, I don't mind Kemba. I think he's a better cash game option than tournament option here, but he's fine. Jeremy Lamb's a guy that I think is very, very interesting. Where I guess he's only available on one site, so he is cheap. Let's see, he is 4,900. He's a guy that has been playing solid minutes right around like 20, 21, 22 most nights, but he's been over 20 fantasy points in like 8 of his last 10 games. He's a guy that you could look at. He does have upside in this matchup, so I do like him a little bit.
Batum starting to show off a little bit more here of late, but prices kind of come up. Like he's 5,900 on DK. I think the upside's a little bit capped, even though it's a good spot. I might be more inclined to kind of just taking Lamb at a cheaper price.
Yeah, I think Batum's a fine cash game option. He is coming off a big game against the Miami Heat, 26 points. He's shot like 66% from the floor. Last 2 games, he has been shooting a little bit better. I don't mind if you want to take a shot on him. That price is a little high, so it does cap his upside a little bit, but he's still a fine option. Same goes for MKG. If you need a decent mid-priced option, he's there. He is questionable for this game, but would expect him to suit up. So I don't mind taking a shot on him either.
Don't mind Dwight Howard. Obviously, don't mind centers against Sacramento. A solid 20-8 game. Didn't have much else against last time these two teams have played. Dwight Howard's just been phenomenal. Over 40 fantasy points in each of his last 4 games. The rebounds are just he's eating them up. He's been over 15 in each of those 4. Like going back, he has double-digit rebounds in 9 of the last 10 games, and would kind of expect him to do that again here.
Yeah, for sure. We're seeing like vintage Dwight right now, and I'm definitely okay with hopping on that train before his legs fall off towards the end of the season. So I would take advantage of him feeling rested now before he starts to feel a little bit old. But Marvin Williams and Kaminsky, 2 guys that you can look at as well. Neither guy's like really strong on my radar, but they're in decent spots too.
Utah, Atlanta next year, 205 total. We'll start with this Utah side. We've seen Rudy Gobert come back. He's played pretty well. Minutes have been somewhat stable, a little bit more stable than I was kind of expecting with him back, but he's there. Rodney Hood is ruled out for tonight's game, so we're starting to kind of get this injury news, and it's a pretty limited Utah rotation right now.
Yeah, it really is. And I have to say, for a while, I felt kind of bad for Utah for being like snake bit with injuries. They played Rudy Gobert 30 minutes on his first night back from like a serious knee injury. He was gone for a month, and they played him 28 minutes the night after on a back-to-back. I'm starting to not feel bad for Utah. Like, I'm sorry, like you're probably doing it to yourself if you're making decisions like that. That being said, his game against the Knicks at 23 points, 14 rebounds, against the Clippers, 16 points, 7 rebounds. We're seeing vintage Rudy Gobert right now at 7K on DraftKings. Sign me up in this matchup. That is way, way too cheap for the upside he has.
Yeah, this is a prime Gobert spot. You got Atlanta, bad rebounding team. They ranked 22nd defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against centers. Obviously, they're bottom 10 over the course of the season. Second most fantasy points allowed this year. Over the last 10, they're allowing the most fantasy points to centers. Like, if you're telling me I don't care if he's not going to, if he's going to play right around 30 minutes, like sign me up for Gobert as well. I just think this is such a good spot, and we know the blocks are going to be there. He's had 6 in his 2 games returning. We know that type of upside's there, and I just think out of that range, I mean, we talked about Cauley Stein, you got Capella, Nurkic, like he's kind of just an easy, clear-cut option for me.
Yeah, I will say this. You are like, he is cash viable, but just be aware that you are taking a little bit of risk by using him in cash games because they could either limit his minutes or something could come out after lock that he's feeling sore and they could scratch him. So you are taking a little bit of risk, but given the matchup, he does feel pretty safe for like a 14 and 12 game or something like that, which is easily going to pay off his salary. So I like him a lot in the spot. I have a lot of interest in this entire Utah side now that Rodney Hood has been ruled out.
Yeah, let's go the guards here. Let's talk Ricky Rubio. I know you have interest in him. You talk about him in your GPP article, and also brought an interesting note that he is better with Gobert on the floor.
Yeah, it's obviously Gobert's only played like 12 games or something this season. It's been a fairly small sample size that Rubio and Gobert have played, but it's like he averages like 4 fantasy points per game more with Gobert as compared to without Gobert. So that's interesting though. It's 20 games for Gobert this season. So, but if you're looking at the starting lineup that they rolled out last game, which was Donovan Mitchell, Ricky Rubio, Joe Ingles, Derek Favors, and Rudy Gobert, Ricky Rubio, 27.4% usage rate, 0.90 fantasy points per minute. We do know that Atlanta is a team that has historically struggled against point guards. They have been a little bit better of late. I'm not buying into it. Dennis Schroeder is still a terrible defender. And they really struggle against the pick and roll, which is something that Ricky Rubio is extremely good at running. So I do like him a lot tonight. I think he's an excellent tournament option given his price. I think 30 plus fantasy points is not out of the realm of possibility considering he's done that in back-to-back games. And I think we could see upwards of 35, 37 fantasy points tonight. And I will take that all day at that price.
Yeah, definitely don't mind it. Donovan Mitchell continues to be a solid option to go with. It's unbelievable how loaded shooting guard is this year. Like this is always kind of a spot where you kind of just always look at the mid-range prior, but now it's becoming like the most top-heavy position on the slate.
Yeah, you can like if you just look at shooting guard on like FanDuel, for instance, from like 8,600 down to like 6,700, everybody in that price range could put up like 60, 65 fantasy points on any given night, except for maybe Gary Harris. But like it is a very loaded position. That being said, Donovan Mitchell been outstanding this entire season. I don't know, like I feel like he's a better cash game option if we're being honest. Like it is an excellent matchup. That being said, like he seems to kind of be capping out recently, right around the mid 30s, mid 40s. I know he has a 50-point game against Cleveland, but like at that price, I think I feel a little more comfortable using him in cash games than using someone else in tournaments.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like he's had 14 assists over his last 2 games. Like other than that, he's kind of just been around the 2 or 3 mark. Like this kind of reminds me of at times like Devin Booker last year, where like he was still scoring like 25 to 30 points, but he was kind of topping out at like 40. And I think that's kind of what we're getting here. And that's not obviously taking anything away. Like you said, like it's just the upside of, a Lou Williams or a Chris Middleton or even a Drew Holiday just seems to be a little bit higher. And obviously Booker right there as well. Like they just, the opportunity of them hitting 50 plus fantasy points just seems much more likely than Mitchell.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you mentioned Ingles here. He's been playing better of late. It's a good spot. A little expensive for my taste, but I don't mind him on this slate. Showed the upside the last time out. It's obviously a guy who can get hot from 3. Atlanta, not a good 3-point defense. Also turned the ball over quite a bit. We've seen Ingles rack up some steals as well. At his price, maybe a little bit more of a FanDuel play for me, just where you got to use 2 small forwards, but he'd be an option I consider.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind Tim. He's another guy in their current iteration of their starting lineup, 17.8% usage rate, only 0.66 fantasy points per minute. But he's a fairly consistent option. Like he's 5,100 on DraftKings, and just looking at his game logs, if you throw out the 2.5 fantasy points against the Pacers, He's a guy consistently getting, 22, 24, 25 fantasy points. And if you're looking in cash games, that's kind of where you're looking for him to pay off that salary. So I definitely don't mind him. He does have upside given the matchup. So if you want to use him in tournaments, go for it. I think he's a little bit better served for cash games though.
Yep. Derek Favors obviously had a strong game against the Clippers. I don't think I'm going back to the well here. I think I'm off Favors tonight.
It is interesting to note his price is really, really starting to drop. Atlanta, over the last 10 games, ranks first in defensive efficiency against power forwards. That's really weird. I don't know that's a trend that I expect to continue, considering they've been really bad against the position for the majority of the season. If you want to take a shot on him at that price, I definitely don't mind it. You do expect his production to take a dip with Gobert, and they're gobbling up, 900 rebounds a game, though.
Yeah. Anyone else to talk about on the Jazz side?
Alec Burks without Rodney Hood should get some run. He only played 18 minutes last game, but 22 fantasy points. Price did not budge. He's 3,300 on DraftKings. What is he on FanDuel?
36.
He's viable on both sides if you expect him to come out and get 22, 24 fantasy points, which is easily attainable given Atlanta sucks.
Yeah. On the Atlanta side, I don't like a lot of names here. I think with Gobert back, I'm definitely going to be off kind of teams against Utah.
The only names that really stand out to me would be John Collins in tournaments. He's still a guy that you could come out and put up a big game. He's been solid recently. I think he's a significantly better play on DraftKings, where he's much cheaper. He's like 4,700 on DraftKings for a guy that has 25 or more fantasy points in 3 straight games. Again, it is a tough matchup, but he's an electric rookie and can put up big games, so I don't mind him. But I'm going to be focusing on guys that kind of, attack from the perimeter. You're looking at Taurean Prince. You're looking at Kent Bazemore, Marco Bellinelli as options here, just because Utah does really struggle against spot-up shooters. So those are the guys that I would focus on. None of them really stand out as outstanding options. But at his price, Taurean Prince is definitely intriguing.
Yeah, and I can't do Schroeder at his price. This is not a spot that I'm really looking to use him. You mentioned, spot shooter. This is a guy who does look to attack the rim a lot. With Gobert back, nah.
Yeah, as many times as Dennis Schroeder drives every game, we could see 8 blocks out of Rudy Gobert.
Oh man, that would be great. Yeah, I don't mind Prince. Prince's option, especially at a small forward spot that doesn't really have a lot of talent tonight, especially with the potential injuries. But Bazemore here, he's been a guy I just haven't been able to get right of late.
Yeah, and with Prince's shooting, the way his shooting has been and his role given, I guess that finger's still really, really bothering him. It's really tough to trust either. But again, these are 2 guys that you could consider in tournaments. Marco Bellinelli's price down to 3,500 on DraftKings. What is he on FanDuel? 3,700 against a team that really struggles against spot-up shooters. He's a guy that I would probably have a little bit of exposure to in tournaments if you're building a bunch of lineups.
Anyone else from Atlanta?
No.
Chicago and New Orleans next year, 227 over under, highest of the night. Chicago, obviously, going to be without Chris Dunn here. We saw Jerry and Grant pick up the start last time out. This is a game that I'm definitely looking to get some exposure to. One, it's obviously the highest total in the slate, but these are just obviously 2 defenses that we look to attack on every given night, and the offense is there for these 2 sides as well.
Yeah, there is a lot of great options on both sides of this ball, and we do have a little bit of narrative. We have brother versus brother, Drew Holiday and Justin Holiday facing off against each other tonight. So a little bit of narrative street for you if you want to use either one of those guys.
And if you did the last time, Drew Holiday was god-awful in that game, but he's been playing out of his mind. Obviously, the ceiling's been helped out by just insane minutes. He's had a couple overtime games in his last 5, but, once again, just dishing out a lot of assists. If he's going to play 35-plus minutes here, as you kind of expect against this Bulls team, Holiday at 7,200 seems like a really good discount.
Yeah, I wrote him up in the GPP article today. I expect him to probably be popular, even though like I do expect Davis and Cousins to be like more popular than him. Something that they did talk about coming out of last game was, given how good Anthony Davis has played of late, defenses are keying in on him, which is really opening things up for Jrue Holiday on the perimeter. I absolutely love him here. There's no way, absolutely no way I'm fading him. Like he is stone cold lock in my lineups unless like he is out. Then I definitely won't be using him. But against the Chicago teams, really, really struggled against shooting guards this season. Over the last 10 games, they're the worst team in the league in defensive efficiency against the position. They struggle against guys that can shoot the three. Everything lines up for him to be just a huge, huge value tonight at that price. He's been over 47 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. Just don't fade him. Just play him here. It's not rocket science. Just play him.
Yep, I'm with you. Do you have any interest in any of the other guards or wings there?
If you want to take a shot on Rondo or Etuan Moore, go for it. Like there is the the Rondo narrative, but like I'm not really looking at either one of those guys. One guy that is a little bit interesting, and I got to find his price here. Ian Clark has been playing at times more minutes. Only 15 against Memphis, but the 3 games prior, 25, 32, 25, 26, 20. There are some decent value options on the slate. If you're looking to be a little bit different and not eat the chalk value, he's a guy that could pay off that salary. Definitely not using him in cash games, but he is a guy that you could, sprinkle in tournaments.
And obviously when we kind of go to Cousins and Davis, it's just been pretty clear. Like when you're looking for upside, it's been Davis of late. We've kind of just been the same thing with Cousins where, serve solid games, but he's just kind of topping out at like 50 fantasy points. And at the price, like I'm still looking for more. And when you factor in Cousins' price, like, okay, Towns is, 1,200 cheaper. You look at Jokic, Howard, all these guys, like I'm going to be taking cheaper options.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to use either one of them, go for it. They're both excellent options. I think I do prefer Anthony Davis in this spot. Obviously, it is a home game, and he does shoot significantly better at home. He's shooting 58.1% at home compared to 53.4% on the road. Obviously, home road splits are very, very noisy unless your name is Ryan Anderson. So take that for what it's worth. But I mean, look, you're locking in a guy that has a pretty high usage rate. It's still second on the team behind Cousins, playing a ton of minutes, rebounding upside, scoring upside. So if you want to use him, go for it. We talked about with Cousins, the turnovers are an issue for him. But again, he's another guy that has massive upside in this matchup. So I would not say no to either one of them. I do prefer Davis in this spot, though.
Yep, I do as well. That's pretty much it with the New Orleans side. Let's move on over to Chicago. As we mentioned, no Chris Dunn. Grant's priced up obviously a little bit. He played 25 minutes last time out against Atlanta, put up 27 fantasy points. We've seen this guy fill in and play pretty well before. I don't mind using him, but I'm also willing to fade in GPPs, even though it is a pretty good spot.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that you can look at in cash games. I think he's a pretty solid option for cash games and tournaments, like especially on DraftKings. I prefer Ricky Rubio for $300 more, but I wouldn't say no to using him. I mean, this is a spot we did see him last time these teams played. 36 minutes, 41 fantasy points. Chris Dunn only played 16 minutes in that game. Again, Chris Dunn is out, so that opens up a lot of usage for a lot of people. Jerian Grant, 18.9% usage, 0.93 fantasy points per minute with Chris Dunn off the floor. Fine option, fine matchup. So would not shy away from using him here.
No, definitely not. I'm not doing Zach LaVine. I just don't feel the need to. I know he had the one good game and obviously has been struggled the last 2. Minutes are still just going to be around 20. Like I still don't feel the need even at his price.
Yeah, they talked about increasing his minutes limit to 24 against Atlanta. They only played him 18. So there is that. Again, this is something we talked about. I don't know if we talked about it while we were recording, but I know you and I discussed it prior to recording the other day. Like we saw this exact same thing with Isaiah Thomas, right? He comes out after, in his debut, first couple of games, plays really, really well, struggles for a couple of games, and then starts to bounce back. Maybe we see that bounce back spot here for LaVine. If you want to take a shot in tournaments, I will say like 31.6% usage rate with no Chris Dunn on the floor. It's about a 40-minute sample size. It's pretty darn solid. So I wouldn't say no in tournaments, but not someone that I'm really heavily looking at here at the shooting guard position. I think there's better options. Justin Holiday, we mentioned the narrative street game. If you want to go there, minutes are still really, really solid. He's still a bunch of shot attempts every single game. It is a great matchup here against the Pelicans team that really struggles to defend shooting guards and small forwards. So I would not shy away from using him here. And he actually 0.77 fantasy points per minute, 20.3% usage rate with no Chris Dunn on the floor.
Yeah, I don't mind going that route. Let's talk the front court here. Obviously Markkanen and Mirotic. We saw Mirotic have the high upside game against Golden State. His price bouncing back up. 6,600. Markkanen 6,700. I don't mind either of these guys in tonight's slate. I still will take Mirotic here. I think he has a higher upside given the fact that his usage and just shot ability, and he can do a little bit more here is something that I'm kind of attracted to.
Yeah, I do like him significantly more than Markkanen in the spots. You mentioned the usage 31.1% without Chris Dunn on the floor, 1.39 fantasy points per minute. It is a tough spot. He's going to draw some Anthony Davis defense. We know Davis can lock in at times, but I do kind of like the spot for him. None of these, I don't think you're using either guy in cash games just because foul trouble could be a concern. But I think both make excellent tournament options. The one guy that I have the most interest in, and like I wrote that I feel like this is chasing just a little bit, but at the same time, I feel like it's not chasing, and that's Robin Lopez. I'll get the chasing part out of the way first. The last time these teams played, Robin Lopez played like 40 minutes. It was an overtime game. Portis did not play in that matchup. Lopez 14 points, 9 rebounds, 26.3 fantasy points. He's not a prolific rebounder, but this is a matchup that is fairly solid actually for centers. Over the last 10 games, they ranked 10th in defensive efficiency. The Pelicans do against centers. You expect him to play decent minutes, probably 30, 32 minutes against the Twin Towers front court. He is the best defender that they have to throw at DeMarcus Cousins. So without Chris Dunn on the floor, 24.7% usage rate, 0.88 fantasy points per minute. He's heating up, 22 for 30 from the field over his last 3 games, 4,600 on DraftKings, and what is he on FanDuel? 4,400. Cheap center options are really tough to come by at times this season. He's a guy that I feel pretty comfortable in his upside in this matchup.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Robin Lopez seems to have it. There's a couple of these Eastern Conference centers that just it's kind of almost like when they play against big opposing centers, they're going to get more time. We've seen it with Valanciunas this year. We've seen it with Gortat as well. And kind of Lopez falls into that similar boat when in the right spot, 25 plus minutes, kind of at a fantasy points per minute type play. Like we've seen it pay off. And I definitely agree with you that this could be one of those spots.
Yeah, and if you, like I said, I think he probably plays well over 30 minutes to match up with Cousins. Again, he is the only like positive defender that they have out of the group of Portis, Markkanen, and Mirotic. So I think this is a spot where you kind of just want to lock in those fairly secure minutes, assuming he stays out of foul trouble, of course.
Yep. As far as like the small forward options go, like it's just a little bit jumbled. Like I don't see the need to do that. Denzel Valentine's had a couple of 20 plus fantasy point games. David Nwaba got some minutes last time out. I don't feel the need to go there.
I don't mind Valentine on FanDuel where he's at 4,900. I think on DraftKings where he's up to like 52. That's kind of like borderline where I do want to fade. I think he's definitely a cash game viable option at both those prices though.
Yep. Anyone else from Chicago?
Nah.
Miami and Houston next, and we're gonna have to kind of wait on the Miami news because they may just be down to 2 guards for tonight's game.
Not even really guards. Like it, yeah. depending on how things shake out, like you're probably, if Dragic and Tyler Johnson sit this game out again, you're gonna get point Wayne Ellington and like point Justice Winslow and point James Johnson. So yeah, we're basically waiting on injury news for this side of the game. It's going to play a pretty big impact on how things play out for both sides of this team, honestly.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about the Miami side if Dragic sits and Tyler Johnson sits, just because I don't see them being able to really keep up with Houston here offensively. Like, this is one of the games that I don't want to, but I do worry about a blowout here.
Yeah, I mean, I would as well. That being said, if both those guys sit, they're down to like 8 players,
Yeah.
so it doesn't necessarily matter because all those guys are going to get a bunch of minutes. So
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Like, when you're down to a limited rotation, those guys are going to play regardless of the score. I was talking more so on the Houston side at some of their
yeah,
prices. We'll start here with Miami. You know, if these guys sit, as you mentioned, Wayne Ellington, I don't like the 5,300 price tag. I don't like it for a guy who I still even think running some ball handling. Like, I don't think there's any real peripheral stats here.
no, there probably isn't. He's a guy that just generally does pretty much all his scoring comes from actual scoring. But again, at that price in a fast paced matchup, doing the majority of the ball handling, playing a boatload of minutes, I definitely wouldn't say no to using him in tournaments here. Probably cash game viable as well, given that price tag. I'm running the court IQ right now with these guys off the floor. Let's see. I omitted it from my game notes because I didn't want to deal with it until we got news. But Wayne Ellington with Dragic, with Waiters, and with Tyler Johnson off the floor. Wayne Ellington, 149 minutes, 22.5% usage rate, 0.76 fantasy points per minute. So he's a fine option. I think the guy that I have the most interest in is going to be James Johnson, assuming those guys are out. He's a guy that definitely turned it up last game. He runs point at times with those guys off the floor. A 21.7% usage rate, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. I do have a lot of interest in James Johnson should Dragic and Tyler Johnson sit.
Yeah, I like him as well. Really nice price tag, 5,600, has small forward eligibility on DK. Like, yeah, I don't mind going to him. He's a guy defensively who can get a couple of defensive stats too. And his assists, like out of the Miami guys who've been dishing out assists, Johnson's been the one.
Yeah, and he's a guy that like he's gonna play big minutes. They need his defensive ability out there on the floor against Houston, especially when Houston goes small. So like I feel pretty comfortable in his minutes in this matchup, regardless of kind of what happens.
Yep. And Josh Richardson, once again, I continue to not mind using him.
Yeah, he's a fine option. Again, I think all these guys outside of like James Johnson are tournament only options. But I mean, you're looking at Josh Richardson, a guy that's been over 30 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games. Big minutes, defensive block steals upside is there. So if you wanted to use him in cash, you could. I think there are probably better options in that price range, though.
Whiteside, the Charlotte game played only 24 minutes after back-to-back games in the third. You can kind of expect that on the back-to-back there. We saw the 250-point outings against Brooklyn and Milwaukee, 2 excellent spots here. Is this a spot where you worry about Whiteside in this type of game?
I do a little bit. I did go back and look last season when these teams met up. He didn't seem to get played off the floor like he was over 30 minutes in those outings. So if you wanted to take a shot on him, go for it. I was kind of telling you before we started recording, I can't shake this feeling that Bam Adebayo is just going to have like a GPP winning game here. Like if Whiteside gets played off the floor and they are forced to go small, like this could be a spot where Bam Adebayo comes out and puts up like 35, 36 fantasy points. And at his price, like that's huge value. He's 3,900 on DraftKings. Let's see, what is he on FanDuel?
He's right around
4,400 on FanDuel. Like he is a guy like I would have some tournament exposure to. Like this feels like a spot where he could put up a big game if this game goes small.
Yeah. And, at times when we've seen Whiteside drop down the minutes, like, his minutes were done last game, we saw Adebayo here play 24. Like, if you're high on Whiteside, you probably shouldn't be really going after him. If you're not high on him, I think you can take even more look at Adebayo here.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's put on to Houston. As I mentioned, with the block concerns, it definitely affects Houston a little bit more here, especially given the fact that there has to be growing concern that they need to kind of give these guys a little bit more of a rest because Harden only played 26 minutes in that Minnesota game, but back up to 35 in the Golden State one. That Minnesota one could have been due to the blowout, but still, these guys are playing monster minutes, and there has to be some limiting at some point.
Well, Harden was on a 30-minute limit last game.
Oh, that's true. Well, minute limits, whatever.
Who cares about minutes limits? Let's throw James Harden out there, which, I mean, it paid off because he hit that clutch 3-point dagger towards the end of that game that pretty much, sealed things. But I don't mind taking a shot on either guy. Like Harden at 10-2, that's a really cheap price. Obviously, there is blowout concern in this game, especially if Dragic and Tyler Johnson sit. It is a game that you do expect to play a little bit slower, so I don't know that he has a ton of upside, but again, both those guys fine in tournaments. You're not looking at either one in cash games. There's just so many better options to use in cash games here, but both guys are excellent targets here. Interesting statistic. Again, I know we talk about home road splits a little bit, but Chris Paul averages 21.4 points and 9.2 assists at home compared to 16.4 and 8.8 on the road. So maybe if you want to fade Chris Paul because he has home road splits like Ryan Anderson, you could.
You could. I don't mind it. Like you said, I think there are better points per dollar options, and I kind of feel that way about all the Houston guys. Joe Green, Trevor Ariza, both due back from suspension. I like Gerald Green here because I think regardless of blowout, like he's still going to get run. He's still going to take a bunch of shots. Like I like him over Ariza. It's
a revenge game for Gerald Green. Did you know that?
I did not actually. Although it does make sense because he's played for how many teams now?
It's only like 6.
I think Khloe Kardashian's the only one that has more.
Probably, yes. Let's see. Gerald Green has played for Boston, Minnesota, Houston, Dallas, the New Jersey Nets, the Indiana Pacers, the Phoenix Suns, and Miami. So 8 total teams. He's had 2 stints with Boston, and this is his second team with Houston, or second stint with Houston. So,
wow, that is a lengthy track record there.
Yeah, it's very Kardashian-like.
But I do like him. I think he's one of my favorite actual Houston guys tonight.
Yeah, he's the guy that in my game notes, I just had his name next to a bullet point with a bunch of exclamation points after it because I actually do like him in this spot.
Yeah. I don't like Clint Capella here. With Whiteside back, we've seen Miami kind of just completely reverse against centers. I don't think Capella can have a bad game. I don't see the upside of his price.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see too much upside. I will say this, though. Miami does struggle at times against the roll man, so there is something to target there, and Clint Capella, one of the best pick and roll men in the NBA. So if you wanted to take a shot, I wouldn't say no, but at 6,600 on DraftKings and what is he 7,700 on FanDuel, I think there's higher upside options in those price ranges.
Yep. Ryan Anderson at home, no thanks.
I'm never going to use Ryan Anderson, even though, what is he coming off, like 13 rebounds or something? Yeah, 13 rebounds against the Warriors. Like, I did not see that coming at all. That was kind of crazy, but yeah, no Ryan Anderson for me.
No. Anyone else from Houston you want to talk about?
No.
Phoenix, Milwaukee, kind of what you expect to be a popular game tonight because we've gotten some of the injury news ruled out for Milwaukee. But let's talk Phoenix here first. Devin Booker obviously up in price. He's been a guy who's been crushing of late. 21 field goal attempts average over his last 5 games. You obviously know the minutes are going to be there. What's been really impressive is obviously the peripheral stats. Like, that's kind of been something we talked about Booker and how I made the comparison to Mitchell from him last year. But over his last 4 games, averaging 7.3 assists, notching 5.5 rebounds per game. Like, I think those stats can be here for this one as well.
Yeah, he is a guy that I do have a significant interest in, especially given this matchup with Milwaukee not having Giannis out there on the floor tonight. Milwaukee is a team that has really, really struggled against wings at times this season. there's going to be some very popular pricey options in this game. Like you're looking at Chris Middleton and Devin Booker pretty much in the same price range here at the shooting guard position. I think a very viable strategy in cash and tournaments is to use both of them. I would not shy away from doing that. Um, I, I mean, Booker's a fine option. Like the Phoenix side of every single game is going to be Booker is cash and GPP viable. TJ Warren is an excellent play as well. He's coming off a stretch of solid outings here. So I definitely wouldn't shy away from using him. He's a cheap way to get some exposure to this game. Minutes are solid back-to-back games with 17 field goal attempts. It's been consistently over 30 fantasy points, a few times over 40. So he's a guy that I do have a significant amount of interest in as well. So those are the two guys. Those are my two primary targets from the Phoenix side of this game.
Yeah, definitely with you. Like, especially on FanDuel, TJ Warren, looking at Giannis, he's out tonight. Jimmy Butler, questionable for tonight's game. And then, you're taking two of the biggest guys off the slate at small forward. Then it drops down to TJ Warren, Harrison Barnes, Otto Porter, and Warren's by far my favorite play of those three. So he's going to be a guy like, I definitely want some pieces of this game. And if I'm not going Booker, like I'm definitely going to have Warren here. Just because I know I can count on him for 35, and obviously there's even upside in this spot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you want to have at least one member of the Phoenix Suns in your lineup tonight. So, like, I think again, if you're fading Devin Booker, TJ Warren is an interesting person to look at. On the same side of things, you could look at Dragon Bender, who again minutes are going to be there with no Marquise Chris. And his price 4,800 on DraftKings, a little high. It is an excellent spot for him though against a Milwaukee team that really struggles down low. They struggle to rebound, so I do really like Dragon Bender here as well.
Yep. You want to take a shot on Tyson Chandler? It's a pretty good spot. Like he's 4,400. Like I can kind of see 25 fantasy points. He's not going to win you anything, but if he's a last piece, I don't hate him.
Yeah, I don't mind using Tyson Chandler in cash games. Not really tournament winning upside, I don't think. I'm hoping we get news on this. Like I do kind of feel like this is going to be a spot where they let Greg Monroe actually play. They did it the last time these teams faced off. He played 32 minutes, 44 fantasy points. They didn't play Alex Lynn in that game. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see if Jay Triano is going to let Greg Monroe get some revenge tonight, because this game is in Milwaukee. So if we don't get news at all on the big man situation in Phoenix, I would still have some tournament exposure to Greg Monroe, because like ownership would probably be really, really low. And at 4,700, if he comes out and gets you like 40 fantasy points, that's GPP winning production right there.
And I don't care who you are. If you have the chance to knock a smug look off Jason Kidd's face, you're definitely going to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So, any other one? Any other people you want to talk about from Phoenix?
Ulyss and Troy, Isaiah Cannon. There we go. I'm getting all their guards confused. Ulyss and Cannon, both guys play like in the mid 20s. Most nights it is a solid matchup, so I don't mind in cash games looking at either one of those guys.
And obviously on the Milwaukee side here, Middleton is going to be an extremely popular play tonight. You're going to see him cover boy of a lot of stuff, kind of as expected. One great matchup here against Phoenix with no Giannis. His usage is obviously through the roof. We saw triple-double last time out. Like recency bias matchup here. Like everything just sets in for Middleton to basically be one of the highest owned players on the slate.
Yes, and I wrote him up on Saturday in the cheat sheets, and I was like, he is a far superior play to Eric Bledsoe. And I was telling you, like I told myself all day Saturday, I'm not fading Chris Middleton. I'm not fading Chris Middleton. I'm not fading Chris Middleton. Lock happens, and Chris Middleton wasn't in my lineups, and I was sitting here kicking myself. He came out, had a huge game, 61 fantasy points, coming off a triple-double. You mentioned the usage, 34.4% this season with Giannis off the floor. Put up 64 fantasy points against Phoenix last time these teams played. That game was without Giannis. Minutes are going to be huge for him. Over 40 minutes in 3 consecutive outings. I don't care what his ownership. Like There is a chance he flops. Of course, there's a chance with every single player in the NBA that they flop, especially Manu Ginobili. He's a great flopper. But like he's just a guy that like I don't really care. I don't care about the price. Like 60 fantasy point upside at 8,700 on DraftKings. That's ridiculous. 8,600 on FanDuel. Like I will take a guy that has 60 fantasy point upside at those prices all day long, and I don't care about the ownership.
Yeah, and we'll move on to Eric Bledsoe, whose price has been adjusted to this news. Also a revenge game for him, taking Phoenix. It's obviously not in Phoenix, but, dropped a huge game on him last time out. Bledsoe's shot has obviously been dropped over his last 5 games, just shooting 34% from the field, 25% from 3. This is obviously a good rebound spot against Phoenix where he can bounce back. I'll get some exposure, but I don't mind fading at his prices either.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mind fading as well. I think in cash games, you can feel pretty comfortable just rolling with the ownership here. I think he's a better play on FanDuel because you get the bonus for steals. He recorded 5 steals on Saturday. It's the 4th time in the last 7 games that he's recorded at least 4 steals. So you are getting a few extra points on FanDuel for those extra steals. Again, cash games, fine. Tournaments, if you want to use them, go for it. I think there's definitely some edge to be gained if you fade him and roll some of these other 8K guys out at the point guard position.
Yeah, and if you're not really looking at those guys or you want someone a little bit cheaper, Malcolm Brogdon, his price is obviously up a little bit. Expected back tonight. Like he's another one I think you can get some exposure to in this side.
Yeah, on DraftKings, he is definitely not priced up where he should.
It's only 5K.
Yeah, on FanDuel, he's 6,300. Again, he's fine. He's a guy you feel pretty comfortable is going to come out and get you like 25 fantasy points. He obviously didn't do it against Miami, but like every game prior to that, he has like at least 24.25 fantasy points. He has upside in this matchup. He's a guy that projects to be a very, very solid value on tonight's slate.
Yep. I kind of think because he said that last game is why we saw such a huge Tony Snell game, but I don't think he gets the minutes that he did last time out with Brogdon back.
No.
I was like, wait, it still looked like the screen's still on me as you're shaking your head.
Like he's coming off like a ceiling game at 26.5 fantasy points. He is literally just a lump of clay that stands like kind of right at the break at the 3-point line and shoots. Just like you're counting on him getting you like 15, 16, 18 points and a couple rebounds and maybe some steals. Like he is not a good basketball player. Just like especially if he's going to be mega chalky, like I am 100% okay at fading him.
Yeah, I am as well. Do you have any interest in front court guys here, John Henson at all?
If you want to take a shot on Henson, go for it. Usage is a little bit elevated without Giannis on the floor. It's about 21.4%. Every time I'm off of Henson, he has a good game, and then every time I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great spot for him, he has a bad game. Definitely cash viable, especially on FanDuel. He should still be power forward eligible, but DraftKings, I'm definitely not using him where he's center eligible only.
Let's move on here. Philly and Memphis, 205 total. Philly, you know how it's been such a long time since you and I have talked about Philly on the pod. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, because they had that London game, so they had like 4 days off before.
But it's been like 2 weeks. I swear, it's been like 2 or 3 weeks since we've talked about Philly.
So they had a big layoff, so like we haven't really been able to talk about them. I just have to say, and I wrote about it in the cheat sheets. How awesome is Joel Embiid? Gets named to an All-Star game, comes out, just drops a massive game on Boston, and then he curves Rihanna on national television. Just like, nah, I'm on to the next one. Sorry, Rihanna, you missed your shot.
I sent out a tweet that next morning asking if anyone else felt more confident in themselves because Joel Embiid curved Rihanna. And I did. I woke up. There was a pep in my step. I felt like I had a nice, vibrant glow to my face, and it was all because of Embiid.
We should all aspire to be Joel Embiid. Just to have the confidence he has to be like, sorry, Rihanna, you missed your chance. I'm on to the next one.
Yes, I would love to inspire to be a 6'11" center in the NBA. Let's talk Philly here. This game is, I still think, somewhat interesting. I think a lot of people are going to be looking elsewhere.
I don't really necessarily like too much of this game as far as like cash game options go. Obviously, you're never going to say no to Joel Embiid in tournaments. He has massive upside. Um, Price is back down on DraftKings under 10K. FanDuel, it's over 10K. I do kind of like him a little bit. Again, it's a tough matchup against Marc Gasol against Memphis, but he's a guy that just could come out and put up a massive game. So I definitely wouldn't say no there. Ben Simmons is a little bit interesting in tournaments as well. Production like has just been it's been like a Bitcoin price chart. Like I think I actually wrote that in the cheat sheets on Saturday. It's like way up, way down, way up, way down, way up. If you want to use him in tournaments, go for it. We have seen Memphis struggle against point guards recently, so he's a guy that you could definitely look at. Outside of him, maybe a little Dario Saric, but the Philly side of this game just really not that intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind it for GPPs. Obviously, you're kind of going with the major guys. I think Saric is still cash game viable. At his price tag, it's still fair. I think because we haven't talked about Saric in a long time, like he's kind of been forgotten, but his play really hasn't been. He's still a guy who's going to get you, pretty much a 25 fantasy point floor. He does have potential for more here. He's been over 30 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Memphis over their last 10 games, 27th defensive efficiency against power forwards. Like Sarge, I still think is consistent. Like, he's in a range here of like Otto Porter, Harrison Barnes, Mirotic, and obviously I think Mirotic has the higher ceiling, but I just want to say don't forget about Sarge tonight. I still think he's playable in all formats.
Yeah, he definitely is playable in all formats. I do have, like I said, I do have a little bit of interest in him tonight.
TJ McConnell's been playing pretty well at 5K. I don't hate it.
Yeah, I mean he's fine. I think there's better options if you're looking in cash games. Jerian Grant's obviously probably the better option. Tournaments, again, Ricky Rubio, a couple other guys in that same price range, probably better options.
On the Memphis side, they're another one that's just dealing with injuries just kind of all over the place. Dylan Brooks questionable for tonight's game. He's been a hot topic, I guess, because people didn't play him. But I mean, otherwise, like we talked about Dylan Brooks, I think a few pods ago, and we're like, every time he has a good game, he lets people down the next. But 4 straight games.
Yeah. This Memphis injury report is frustrating. You have Andrew Harrison's probable, Dylan Brooks questionable, Mario Chalmers questionable, Jarrell Martin questionable, James Ennis out, JaMychal Green out, Chandler Parsons out. And the only person on that team that's not listed on the injury report is like Wayne Selden and Marc Gasol. And like, I don't know, like I joked about it over the weekend, but like this feels like a spot where all those guys are listed questionable. And then 5 minutes after lock, Marc Gasol gets ruled out.
And it would never surprise us. You cannot be shocked at that.
No, you really can't. It's a spot like I think we still kind of want to wait out some injury news. Like if Mario Chalmers sits, you're gonna look at Andrew Harrison as an interesting cash and tournament option at his price. Obviously, Wayne Selden came out last game, had a huge game. I feel like we hit the nuts with Wayne Selden that game, and like we probably shouldn't go back to him here. But given his usage currently with JaMychal Green off the floor and James Ennis off the floor and Chandler Parsons off the floor, 28.2% usage rate, 1.27 fantasy points per minute. I would currently, without any other news, project him around 22, 24 minutes, 4,100. Given this matchup, that's fine. Obviously, you can fade him in tournaments if you want to, due to the expected ownership. You mentioned Dylan Brooks; he's a fine option too. I'm probably gonna hop off the Dylan Brooks train given his current price, but again, another guy. If you want to take a shot on him, I don't feel strongly against him or for him in this matchup.
Yeah, FanDuel, he's still 4K. I think he's much more viable over there. You mentioned Seld. I think he's still viable. You mentioned the usage with everyone off the court, basically. Yeah, I don't mind these guys. Like Memphis isn't really my favorite team to use. We've talked about a lot of shooting guard options already, and I think I'm going to be taking those guys over Tyreek. Marcus Saul, I don't know about him. He's kind of a guy that I don't know what to do with at this point.
Every time it feels like he's in a good spot, he sucks.
Yeah.
And every time he's like it feels like he's in a bad spot, he crushes. He is third on this team in usage without JaMychal Green, without Ennis, and without Parsons on the floor. 27.8%. He's been fairly consistent for the majority of the season. So if you want to go there, it's fine. It's not the greatest of matchups against Embiid, but I feel pretty confident that he probably comes out and gets you 35, 40 fantasy points. So if you're wanting to fade the risk with Gobert and a couple of these other centers in that price range, I don't necessarily mind using him. The interesting name to keep an eye on here is Jarrell Martin. He's a guy, his price is up because he has been performing pretty well recently. Against New Orleans, 35 minutes, 22 fantasy points. Against the Knicks, 31 minutes, 30.5 fantasy points. That Knicks game was the spot where everyone was on Deonta Davis, and Martin was the one that ended up crushing. But he's the guy you would expect to get a significant amount of run here without JaMychal Green. DraftKings already priced him up. I think on FanDuel he is $4K. I do like him a little bit more over there, but he's another guy that you can look at kind of in that $4K range tonight.
Do you feel like there's any, for some reason, Jarrell Martin comes into my head and I kind of think foul trouble. And maybe it's just I'm overblowing it because I've used him a couple of times and he's gotten into foul trouble, but I don't know. Is there any sort of risk or have you noticed?
Not really. If you're just looking at his game logs against New Orleans for the rest of the time, it's like 1, 2, maybe 3 fouls in like 20, 22 minutes. So it's not terrible.
He's no Marquise Chris.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's definite. Interesting statistic here that I'll just throw out for people, maybe the betting crowd out there. Memphis is 2-12 against Eastern Conference opponents this season compared to 14-17 versus the West. So they have won 9 straight against Philadelphia dating back to December 2012. So just interesting statistic out there for the betting crowd.
Ooh, the betting crowd. Always a crowd favorite.
Yes.
Anyone else you want to talk about from this game?
Not really. Again, I think we're just waiting. We just kind of have to wait on the news, and see who gets ruled in and who gets ruled out, and hope that we get that news in time.
Yep, definitely. Washington, Dallas, next one here. 213 total. Looking at the Washington side here, I think Wall's interesting. I think I'm just only kind of willing to go there in GPPs at his price. Crushed Dallas last time out. We've been targeting point guards against Dallas for quite some time now. Price is down a little bit. He's at 9,400. He was kind of climbing and up over 97, 98. But I don't mind the spot here. GPP only for me, though.
Yeah, I actually like Wall a significant amount here. He's coming off a bad game against Detroit. He played 37 minutes, had 38 fantasy points. The Charlotte game, if you're just looking at the box score, looks like he had a bad game, but only played 24 minutes. But this dude's been over 50 fantasy points and 4 straight games prior to that. I guess a Dallas team that is really, really, really bad against point guards. They're 30th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. They're 25th, in fantasy points allowed on the season. It is an excellent spot here for him. If you're wanting to fade some of the chalk guys like Eric Bledsoe, I think John Wall is probably the second best option behind another guy that we're going to get to probably in the next game.
Yep. Sticking in the backcourt, I don't really like Bradley Beal because of the other options. It's not that great of a spot here either for Dallas or for Beal.
No, I'm waiting for that price to come down just a little bit more. If he falls down into the like the CJ McCollum territory where he's under 7K, I'll start using him. Not really a great spot against the Dallas team, ninth in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against shooting guards. They've been really good against them the entire season. So not somewhere that I'm looking tonight.
Nope. Otto Porter coming off a big game. 4 steals was something that kind of helped him in that. I've been waiting for a bigger Otto Porter game for quite some time now, because especially on slates like this where small forward is fairly weak, especially on FanDuel, I think he becomes a little bit more playable, but I'm not the biggest Otto Porter guy.
No, and I think if you're looking at the small forward position from Washington, you're probably looking at Kelly Oubre, who's been playing extremely well of late. He's 4,700 on DraftKings. He's averaging 19.5 points over the last 4 games. He's 14 of 23 from 3-point range in that span against a Dallas team that really struggles to defend the 3-point line. He's a guy that Scott Brooks has been talking up recently, and the minutes have been fairly solid for him. So I don't mind using him over Otto Porter. Probably not going to get like the 35, 36 fantasy point upside that we saw against Detroit, but in this spot at 4,700 on DraftKings, and let's see, he is 4,900 on FanDuel. Like, you're looking at a guy that probably gets you 25, 30 fantasy points. So I definitely do like him a little bit more than Otto Porter just because he's cheaper.
Yep, no, I agree with you there. Front court here, you looking at anyone? Done trying to pinpoint Gortat. I don't think he's really going to be needed out there for this one.
I'm not on the Gortat train. Markieff Morris is someone that's a little bit interesting, but again, you're taking a significant risk with using him just because he has Markieff Morris. Tournaments only for me. Gortat, if you want to in tournaments, go for it. There's just so many better options.
Yep. Let's take a look on the Dallas side here. I don't have a ton of interest on this team. You can always kind of look at Dennis Smith as a GPP option. Playing well, had a great game against Washington last time out. We've seen the minutes become a lot more clear. He's been over 30 in each of his last 5 games. The upsides finally start to bend there. It's not one of those ones where he gets you 28 fantasy points and then sits the 4th. Like, he's actually playing the 4th finally. And I think maybe that a little bit has to do with Beret being out in that span, but overall, I still don't mind him here.
Yes, Beret being out for, I think he sat like a game, definitely helped. Also, Devin Harris has missed the last 2 games, and he, I believe, as Carlisle said, it is questionable at best.
Oh, Carlisle.
So that definitely helps as well, just having another guard out of that rotation. I really like Dennis Smith here in the spot in tournaments. Again, another guy that you're not looking at in cash games, but if you're wanting to be different from the crowd, he does have excellent upside. I mean, we saw it in this matchup last time out, 45.5 fantasy points, 25, 8, and 8 in that game. Had an excellent game against Portland in a spot where you really wouldn't expect him to. You mentioned the minutes. They've been solid recently. I like him a significant amount in this spot for tournaments.
As far as other Dallas guys go, I don't mind Harrison Barnes. He's probably the second on my list. I'm not looking at Wes Matthews. I think there's just better options. You have Brogdon for 100 more. You have Gerald Green for 100 more. You have Oubre, you have Prince Lamb. Like we've mentioned other guys I think I prefer over Wes Matthews.
I really like Barnes here. Again, he's a guy that you're locking in a significant amount of minutes in. He's fairly safe floor at 6,500 on DraftKings. He is 67 on FanDuel, and he flashed upside in this matchup. This is a spot where Washington does struggle to defend small forwards and power forwards this season. So I think he's an excellent option in all formats. I wrote on Saturday, I think it was, that one of Maxi Kleber or Dirk Nowitzki was going to have like a huge game because Portland really struggles against post-ups, and both those players are guys that are posting up a significant amount. Dirk Nowitzki came out and actually had a big game against the Portland Trailblazers, 30 minutes, 34.8 fantasy points on FanDuel. I would not shy away from taking a shot on Dirk Nowitzki here.
Oh, I wouldn't either. 4,700. I'm definitely with you. That's about it for me on the Dallas side.
Yes, same here.
Portland and Denver next here, 210. I kind of think this one has potential to be, outside of maybe one or two players, has potential to be kind of a dud.
There's absolutely one player that I am 100% not fading on the slate. I don't care what his ownership is. I don't care if people are off of him. I don't care if I'm
Nurkic.
just not.
I'm just
No,
kidding.
no, no. I wrote him up in the GPP article, and it is Damian Lillard. I am all about the All-Star snub life. I am all about that narrative. All about it. Give me all the Damian Lillard tonight.
Yeah, he's a guy. He's at a slight discount from the Chris Pauls and the John Walls here tonight. I think he's obviously a guy you can play in all formats. I'm with you, a guy that I'm looking to get a lot of exposure to. He is that guy from that Portland team that I just feel comfortable using because I don't really like the Portland side outside of that. Like Lillard's the only guy for me.
There's a couple guys I do have interest in from this Portland side of things. Obviously, you mentioned Yusuf Nurkic. It is a revenge game for Nurkic, and he did actually come out and say that when it's in Portland, it's just another game, but this one's in Denver. It is different. He has been looking forward to this matchup. He has friends and family there. Look, this dude's been either playing like 18 to 20 minutes or over 30 minutes. You are taking a significant risk by using him in a bad matchup. But he does have like 60 fantasy point upside in the spot, and at 6,500 on DraftKings. And what is he on FanDuel? He is 6,700. If you want to use him in tournaments, go for it. You're definitely not using him in cash games, though.
No, definitely not. We're only playing him for the narrative. Like that's really all it is. So keep that in mind. If you're building a lot of lineups, I'm fine with getting a Nurkic lineup in there once or twice. But if you're playing it pretty narrow, I don't think you should really make your cut.
No, the other guy that I do have a little interest in, and God, it feels so gross saying this, it's Evan Turner.
Jesus. Man, are you feeling okay? What's going on over there?
I might have the flu. Look, Portland's been rolling out some 3-guard lineups recently. They've been really, really effective for this team. Evan Turner, he's really, really cheap. He's under 4K on both sides. It's a solid matchup. Denver does struggle to defend pick and roll ball handlers. Evan Turner, 75th percentile in the NBA in a pick and roll efficiency. They struggle to defend in isolation. He's not very good in isolation, but about 11% of his possessions come in isolation. Look, if you're looking for a guy in that price range that can maybe get you 20 to 24 fantasy points, I think he's intriguing.
I won't say no. It's a weak position tonight. He's value. I definitely won't say no to it. Guy I will say no because of his price is Alfred Camino. I know he's been solid in 2 of the last 3 games. If he was 4,700 again, sure. I just don't want to pay 55.
Yeah, I was all over him even at 56 against Dallas just because I thought the matchup was solid. But he's a guy I think you're fading at his current price.
Yeah. I don't have really much interest here in McCollum. I know he's cheaper, but I still rather go other directions.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
So, on the Denver side, this is why I think some of these guys are a little bit interesting. Once again, I have no issues with the guards. I still think Gary Harris is kind of the mid-range guy that I would choose over the CJ McCollums and Will Bartons there.
Yeah, like none of these guys like Jamal Murray and Gary Harris, they're not guys that I feel strongly about trying to force into my lineup. But like if you're wanting to get exposure to either one of them, I think they're both fine. I do prefer Harris a little bit over Murray, just because you're getting peripheral stats out of him. You're getting some defensive stats. You're getting more rebounds and assists out of him. So you're not necessarily depending on a guy shooting like freaking 60% from the floor to hit value. So I do kind of like Gary Harris in the spots, but I'm not overly excited about the guard position from the Denver side of this game.
And it's weird, we've seen Mike Malone pull some guys here for bad play during games, but it doesn't matter what Wilson Chandler seems to do on the court, which sometimes is not much at all. He will go out there and play 30 plus minutes.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I think Mike Malone is afraid to pull him. I think it might have something to do with that like face that's on his neck. Like that might be why Mike Malone is. is afraid to
Hey, Wilson, come here. We're gonna get some extra, and then he stops, and then never mind. Like just walks the other way.
I actually, I was talking with you prior to recording. I think Wilson Chandler is like the nuts tournament option on this slate. At his price, he's 4,500 on DraftKings. He is 5K on FanDuel. Look, we like to target guys that post up against the Portland Trail Blazers. They are a terrible defense when it comes to post up possessions. Like it's one of the spots where you can really attack them. Wilson Chandler, not doing it a ton. It is about 8% of the time of his possessions this season. But he's one of the most efficient post up like players in the NBA. Is in the 91st percentile. So this is a spot he's actually produced extremely well in this matchup before. Portland does struggle against power forwards. They started Trey Lyles and Wilson Chandler alongside each other last game. I expect that to continue. You can argue which one's playing the power forward position. It's semantics. It doesn't really matter. Like I think this is a spot where Wilson Chandler, excellent tournament option. And I obviously don't mind Trey Lyles either. I've been on the Trey Lyles train for God knows how long at this point. Like I've lost track of how many times I've used Trey Lyles. I think it's every game that Denver has played. So if you want to use him, go for it. But I really think Wilson Chandler is like the nuts option tonight.
Yeah, I like him here, especially at his price. Jokic, back-to-back kind of down games by his standards, I guess, that come out that big game against Dallas. It's not a great spot here against Portland. If you're running out a ton of lineups and GPPs, I'm fine with it. I prefer Towns at basically an identical price.
Yep, I agree.
So let's move on here. Let's go to this Minnesota Clippers game that ends the night, 221 total. On the Minnesota side, obviously, we're going to be starting with the Jimmy Butler injury news. It flared up over the weekend, which was very random. Questionable for tonight's game.
He is out. Him and Jamal Crawford are both out for this game.
Well, that was perfect timing. So for me, I mean, that makes a lot of the Minnesota not secondary guys, but other stars much more playable.
That makes this entire game much more intriguing. I think we have to start with as far as at least cash games goes with Jeff Teague at the point guard position. Given his price, given the matchup that we're looking at here without Jimmy Butler, I know it's only a 71-minute sample size, 20.2% usage rate. Like he's coming off a game where he didn't play extremely well against Toronto. They are a team that has at times been solid against point guards this season. Shot 2 of 11 from the floor. Like the 11 field goal attempts is definitely promising. 10 assists in that game. Like he's 5,700 on FanDuel or 5,700 on DraftKings. He is 6K on FanDuel. That is an excellent price for a guy that we know has like 35, 40 fantasy point upside here. So I think it starts with him at the point guard position without Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I really like Teague. I hate him this year because he's burned me quite a few times, but I'm willing to trust him in this matchup and just he's played well against him earlier this season despite not shooting great. I do think the peripheral stats are going to be there tonight, which you can't always say for some of the other options, aka Andrew Wiggins. But Wiggins is interesting here because he's kind of cheap here without Butler. For some reason, every time I think Wiggins is going to be somewhat lower owned, he ends up not being lower owned. And that's the problem I have. I only want to use Wiggins when he's lower owned.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, I think it was the Orlando game, or no, it was the Houston game the other day where he was like 50% owned, and I was just like, why is Andrew Wiggins 50% owned? Like I realized it was a good matchup, but it was shocking to see him 50% owned. I think he's going to be pretty popular tonight. 6,100 on DraftKings. It's still a fair price. I mean, he came out and put up almost 40 fantasy points against Toronto in a matchup against a team that's really solid defensively. 6,200 on FanDuel. And he's got like a 30.1% usage rate with no Jimmy Butler on the floor. 0.84 fantasy points per minute. I definitely wouldn't say no to Wiggins. Like I think this is a spot where we can go back to him tonight.
Yeah, I especially like the DK because he's small forward eligible. I don't have to waste a shooting guard spot on him. FanDuel, I do, and we've talked about a lot of shooting guards, but I definitely don't mind using him there. Um, yeah, I do think he's playable in all formats.
Yeah, the other guy that's a little bit interesting before we get to the front court is Marcus Georges Hunt. 29 minutes against Toronto, 19 fantasy points. Shot 3 of 10 from the floor. A couple of those shots fall, and he's over 20 fantasy points. He's minimum salary across both sites. Goran Dragic unlikely to play Monday, so both Dragic and Tyler Johnson unlikely to play tonight. So we already covered that game, so y'all already know our opinions on that. But Marcus Georges Hunt, interesting minimum salary cash punt. I don't think you're using him in tournaments though.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Let's jump into the front court here. We're talking about how I like Towns over Jokic. That's going to be the case again for me tonight. Coming off a game, I mean, Toronto had a little bit of foul trouble, only played 28 minutes. You can count on him here for 35 plus, as long as he stays out of foul trouble, which I anticipate him to do here, given who he's facing. We just look at a Clippers team that's not great against centers. They've been struggling more so against them of late, especially allowing fantasy points. But over the last 10 games, defensive efficiency, they are 23rd. Towns is my guy at center spot here if I'm going to be ponying up some cash.
Yeah, it's a yarn season.
You love saying yarn season.
I love saying yarn season. I don't know why. It's just fun. It's fun. So that's what DFS is all about. It's about having fun. So I love him in the spot against the Clippers team. You mentioned 23rd in defensive efficiency. No DeAndre Jordan. Montrezl Harrell and Willie Reed are not keeping Cats in check tonight. So, yeah, I'm not fading him. 1.27 fantasy points per minute with no Jimmy Butler and no Jamal Crawford on the floor. So have fun fading that if you're not going to play Cats. Just have fun.
Yeah. Taj Gibson, once again, I don't have any issue not using him. It's fairly cheap, 5,400. Coming off a decent game against Toronto, he did play 40 minutes. He's played really well against the Clippers this season, but Garnish, I mean, they've had a lot of front court injuries to where the fact that I think that can be a little bit downplayed.
Yeah, that sample size is a little bit tainted by like the entire team being out at different points in this season.
Yeah, but I still don't mind him here. It's not a horrible spot.
Yeah, like I think everybody from the Minnesota side of this game is basically in play at this point. Like, if you're stacking Minnesota, like I wouldn't say no to doing that.
No. Let's look at Clippers here, and I want to start with Blake Griffin because you and I were talking a little bit about him before the show. He just kind of lacks that GPP upside that you kind of need right now. Like, and especially on FanDuel, I think where he lacks defensive stats, like he's not getting you over that 50, 55 marker like some of these other guys, which is kind of the issue I have with him. I think he's a fine cash game guy, but I don't know if I'm still not paying that, especially on tonight's slate. Like, it's almost like the slate has to work for me to play Blake Griffin.
Yeah, you're looking for a triple double out of him to get that tournament winning upside at his price, and it's just not something that I feel like he's going to get in this matchup. Taj Gibson, despite his age, is an excellent defender. They've done a good job of keeping power forwards in check for the majority of the season. If you want to use him in cash games, obviously the usage is going to be pretty high for him. I wouldn't say no to that, but like at 8,600 on DraftKings, if you're just removing positions from the equation, I would rather have Damian Lillard. I would rather have Chris Middleton. I would rather have Lou Williams, Eric Bledsoe, Dwight Howard. There's just a long list of guys that I would consider using over Blake Griffin in the spot.
I need to ask you, did Lou Williams really have 10 steals over the weekend? That's not like a stat correction that never got corrected. Well, all right then. All right. I like Lou Williams and GPPs tonight. Obviously losing Butler hurts them a little bit defensively. I still think you can obviously toss, Teague and Wiggins on him. It's a little bit of a different story as well, but I don't mind him in GPPs if you're kind of looking to game stack this one.
Yeah, he got a lot more interesting with Jimmy Butler being ruled out, and yeah, he did almost have a triple double with only 7 assists and 2 rebounds. Like that is a real thing. Like I didn't actually go back and watch that game. I want to see. I have to imagine like he just fell on the ball like several times whenever it was like rolling around and they counted it steals. But I mean, it was at Utah, so like he didn't get the home field
Right.
or the home court scorer. So like, yeah, he's fine. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a guy that's just been like playing at an all-star level recently, all the usage going his way. Yeah, I definitely don't mind going there.
On the Clippers side, you want to take some shots on any of their guards. Teodosic coming off a down game against Utah. I know you liked him against that Denver side. I mean, he's shown some 30-plus fantasy point upside of late.
I don't mind him. I had a little bit more interest in him when I thought Jimmy Butler might play and the offense might flow more through some of the peripheral guys. But yeah, I mean, 5,400, he's fine. Outside of him, like Wes Johnson has quietly been just smashing, coming off 32 fantasy points against Utah, 28 against Denver, 38 against Houston, 22, 20, 22, 24. It's really gross to consider using Wes Johnson. But if you're wanting to get exposure to this game and you're wanting to do it from a cheap guy, I don't mind Wes Johnson.
No, I don't either. You know, he's going to take a ton of threes. Defensive stats will always be there with him. He's usually good for 2 blocks plus steals, and that's obviously very solid, especially on FanDuel.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm not going with you. We mentioned Montrezl Harrell and Willie Reed filling in. I'm not going there tonight.
No, because they've shown like recently, like they've been going small at times with Griffin at the 5 and like Wes Johnson's. Like I think last game in the second half they started Wes Johnson over Willie Reed. So I don't think you're really looking at either one of those guys.
No. Anything else you want to talk about here?
No.
All righty. That's going to wrap up today's slate. Let's go highest score. Let's go below 8K.
Highest score below 8K. I'm going to go with Jrue Holiday.
Give me some Rudy Gobert here. So two of some of our finer plays, our favorite plays on the slate.
For sure.
So that's going to wrap it up for us. You can check out Brent's GPP article for tonight's slate. Also, cheat sheets will be out by 4 Eastern as always. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good luck.